Welcome. Imagine yourself in a vast, dimly lit room where the weight of centuries seems to settle gently around you. There are no loud sounds, no distractions, only the soft rustle of time itself, moving slowly and steadily. This is where our journey begins. Here, in this quiet space, we will explore history as it has never been told before. Gently, calmly, with a rhythm that invites you to relax and drift off if you wish. Tonight, we'll immerse ourselves in the life of Catherine the Great Empress, whose reign left an indelible mark on Russian history. Her life was full of intrigue, power, and challenges, but it was also shaped by quiet moments, subtle decisions, and the weight of ruling an empire. We will take a slow, steady walk through her world, touching on the calm and the chaotic, the grandeur and the simplicity, all while you let your mind settle into the flow of this history. This is a journey through time, not to excite or overwhelm, but to soothe and relax. So, let go of today's concerns. Feel the gentle pull of history and let it take you away. Close your eyes and imagine yourself standing in the heart of 18th century Russia. You are far from the luxury of the imperial court. Instead, you find yourself in the fields, cold, damp, and vast, endlessly stretching across the Russian countryside. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, the wind biting at your skin, and the weight of unrelenting work pressing down on your shoulders. The rhythm of life here is simple but harsh, defined by the unforgiving cycles of nature and the demands of the land. As a peasant in Catherine the Great's Russia, your days are a constant struggle for survival. Every morning, the sun rises too early and sets too late. Your hands are calloused, worn from the endless toil of planting, harvesting, and maintaining the fields. You work the land that you don't own, for a landowner who doesn't know your name. The rhythm of your days is one of sweat and sacrifice, with little to show for it other than the constant grind. You are a cog in the larger machinery of the Russian Empire, but your life feels like it's stuck in the same place year after year. The promise of prosperity, of upward movement in society, is as distant as the farthest horizon. Instead, there is the never-ending weight of duty. You have little to no voice in the decisions that affect your life. Even the village you live in, the one where your ancestors have toiled for generations, offers no refuge. It's a small, tight-knit place, but the walls feel closer than they should. The winter months bring the cold, an unforgiving companion that cuts through the thick layers of clothing you wear. The wood stove crackles in the corner of your tiny, humble home, but it never seems enough to truly warm the chill that seeps into your bones. There is always the constant worry of running out of food, the fear of the freezing nights that could be your last. The snow outside falls silently, but it's a reminder that nothing here is easy, and nothing is ever certain. Yet, for all this hardship, there is an odd sort of rhythm to your life. It's the simplicity, the routine, the quiet resilience of the peasants around you create a strange comfort, even in the most difficult of times. Your work, though grueling, is the backbone of Russia. Without you, the empire could not function. But it is a thankless role, and you are too low on the social ladder to ever feel the rewards of your labor. Imagine the cool breeze that brushes against your face as you work the land, your thoughts drifting from the day's struggles. Your hands are rough, your back sore, but your mind is quieter here in this moment. It's a peaceful kind of solitude, one you've learned to accept, even if your body aches with the weight of daily life as a peasant. Your role is to serve, to support the empire's grandeur, but the grandeur never touches you directly. Instead, it is a far-off dream, something that lives in the stories told by the upper class. It's by the ones who live in the grand palaces of St. Petersburg. You, however, are here in the cold fields, working for survival. Your existence is a reflection of the time you live in, a time of rigid class structures and unspoken boundaries. The nobility lives their lives in splendor, while you struggle just to make it through the day. The disparity between the lives of the elite and the peasants is vast and ever-present. The nobles may never know the grind of the land or the fear of hunger that you face, and their lives are filled with luxury, while yours is a simple, steady march towards an uncertain future. But in all this, there is also a strange comfort in the simplicity, the repetition, the quiet moments in between work, the small joys of family, of sharing a meal after a long day, of knowing that despite everything, you are still here. You are part of something larger than yourself, even if it feels distant, even if it never touches your life in a meaningful way. Imagine yourself slowly walking away from the fields. The sun sets in the distance, and the earth beneath your feet seems to quieten. The winds, which were once biting and harsh, now feel gentler, softer. Your body is tired, but your mind is at peace. As you head toward your small cottage, the warmth of home awaiting you. This was life for many in Catherine the Great's Russia, life of hardship, but also a life of resilience. A life that was never easy, but one that was lived with quiet perseverance. In this moment, the struggles of the past seem distant, fading away as you retreat into the gentle quiet of the evening. Now that we've walked the quiet, laborious life of the Russian peasant, let us turn our gaze to a figure whose life was far removed from that of the common folk. Imagine yourself now, not in the fields, but in the opulent palaces of Russia, surrounded by the grandeur of the royal court. You are Catherine, born Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, small German principality, far from the cold, harsh winds of Russia. Your early life, though comfortable, lacked the glitter and grandeur you would one day experience. But even from a young age, you felt the pull of something greater. Life was never quite content for you. There were dreams, aspirations, ambitions that reached beyond the walls of your family's modest home. At the age of 14, you were chosen as a bride for the future Tsar of Russia, Peter III. Though it was an arranged marriage like so many in royal families, the union would change the course of history. But imagine, for a moment, the uncertainty and anxiety you must have felt. You were young, barely a teenager, and your life was about to change forever. From the small court of Anhalt-Zerbst, you were suddenly thrust into the intricacies and dangers of the Russian court. The cold, unfamiliar land, the language, the culture, it must have been overwhelming. When you arrived in Russia, the future seemed uncertain. You were a foreign princess, an outsider in a strange land, and the path before you was difficult. Your husband, Peter III, was not a man of great ability or wisdom. He lacked the support of the Russian nobility, and his reign was short and unremarkable. Yet in the midst of his weaknesses, you saw an opportunity. You quietly observed, learned, and waited. You understood that. For someone in your position, survival depended on both intellect and patience. Every glance, every conversation at court, every political maneuver, you carefully considered. It wasn't long before you realized that power in Russia was fragile. It was within your grasp. The opportunity would soon present itself. As Peter's reign faltered, Catherine's moment came. In 1762, only 6 months after Peter ascended the throne, he was overthrown by a coup, and Catherine became empress. The transition was swift, almost unnoticed by many, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter in Russian history. Imagine yourself now sitting on the throne, the weight of the empire pressing down on you. Russia was vast, almost immeasurable in its expanse, and it was fractured. It was a land full of diversity, with people from different ethnic backgrounds, languages, and traditions. To rule such an empire was no small task, but Catherine had prepared for this moment all her life. She was calm, strategic, and focused. Your first challenge as empress would be to consolidate power. The nobility, always ready to challenge any ruler, watched carefully. But you knew how to play the game of politics, with intelligence, tact, and an understanding of the delicate balance of power. You forged alliances, secured the loyalty of the military, and gained the support of the people. Over the years, your reputation as a wise and capable ruler grew, but your reign was not without its challenges. There were uprisings, internal struggles, and wars with foreign powers. Yet, in the face of it all, you maintained control, expanding Russia's borders and cementing your legacy. As Catherine the Great, you became one of the longest-reigning monarchs in Russian history. Under your rule, Russia flourished. The arts, culture, and education blossomed. You were a patron of the Enlightenment, inviting thinkers and intellectuals from all over Europe to your court. But it wasn't just about the court and the grand jury. It was also about the quiet reforms you initiated. The gradual changes to the law, to education, to the way Russia governed itself. Even as your influence spread, you remained keenly aware of your position. Your reign was built not on extravagance, but on the careful, steady application of power. You knew the dangers of indulgence, the temptation to overreach. Your legacy would not just be one of conquest and grandeur, would also be one of steady, measured growth. In the quiet moments, away from the tumult of politics and the concerns of ruling an empire, you were still Catherine, a woman from a distant land who never forgot her roots. You remembered the uncertainty of your early life, the feeling of being an outsider. And so, as Empress, you kept your people close. You understood that your empire was not just about the elite, but about the many lives that made up the vast Russian landscape. As we leave behind the towering presence of Catherine the Great herself, we begin to step gently into the quiet spaces that history sometimes overlooks. The mysteries, the rituals, the practices whispered through time. These are not the tales of conquest or diplomacy, but the cultural undercurrents that shaped the Russian soul during her reign. Imagine yourself now not in the palace, nor in the fields, but walking slowly through a candlelit hall of an ancient monastery on the outskirts of St. Petersburg. The stone walls are cool to the touch. The flickering light dances along the icons' faces of saints, gold leaf glinting dimly in the gloom. The scent of wax, incense, and damp stone fills the air. It is here, in places like these, where Russia's mysticism lived, breathed, and endured even during the most enlightenment-driven years of Catherine's rule. Despite her fascination with reason and Western philosophy, Catherine ruled over a land thick with folklore, superstition, and spiritual mystery. The Russian Orthodox Church, powerful and steeped in centuries of tradition, was not merely a religious institution. It was a keeper of stories, of ritual, of belief systems that ran deeper than law. One such mystery that quietly hummed beneath the surface of her empire was the rise of the Old Believers, a devout and often persecuted sect who refused to accept reforms in Orthodox liturgy. To outsiders, their customs seemed strange: long beards, constant crossings, rigorous fasting, and an almost monastic devotion to the old ways. To Catherine, they were both a curiosity and a challenge. She didn't suppress them violently as her predecessors had, but instead sought to study them, understand them. Their quiet resistance was, in its own way, a mirror to the sprawling contradictions of the Russian state. And then, there's the mystery of the amber room, a dazzling chamber, once called the eighth wonder of the world, covered entirely in amber panels, gold leaf, and mirrors. This exquisite room was originally constructed in Prussia and gifted to Peter the Great of Russia. By Catherine's time, it had become a jewel of imperial pride, a room said to glow with a strange warmth and beauty. She visited it often, adorned it further. But what became of the amber room after Catherine? That remains one of history's quiet riddles. It disappeared during World War II, likely looted by German forces, and has never been seen again. Even today, explorers and historians search for Rumors claim it's hidden in underground bunkers, sunken ships, or buried beneath ruined castles. Beyond objects, there were whispers of deeper beliefs. Peasant tales of forest spirits called leshy, or water nymphs known as ruselka, were still told in the quiet corners of the countryside. Though these were dismissed by scholars, they formed part of the cultural imagination of Catherine's Russia. She herself may not have believed in them, but she knew that to rule the Russian soul, one must respect its myths. And then there was the architecture, the buildings that rose in her era, not just in the capital, but across the empire. Catherine admired the European neoclassical style. And yet, even in her newly built palaces, the Russian spirit remained present. Thick walls for harsh winters, onion domes that reached toward the heavens. Churches that sang not with bells, but with echoing chants in cavernous halls. Her rule gave rise to libraries, theaters, museums, the Hermitage. Born from her private collection, became one of the greatest cultural institutions in the world. But within these rooms, now silent, now echoing with the steps of scholars, you can still feel the layers. The tension between old and new, between faith and reason, between superstition and science. And if you stood quietly in a village during this time, perhaps on a midsummer night, you might witness the flicker of a fire festival. Villagers dancing, jumping over flames, singing old songs in dialects even the capital no longer understood. Catherine's Russia was not just the Russia of politics. It was also a land of rituals, kept alive through memory, repetition, and dreams. Now, as we move into the world of the elite, let us imagine ourselves walking through the grand halls of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. The sounds of the bustling court hum softly in the background, the soft shuffle of silken shoes across marble floors, the quiet murmur of conversations in French, the faint clink of crystal glasses. The air is thick, with the scent of fine perfume, the warmth of candles, and the ever-present sense of refinement. Here, we are far removed from the hardship of the peasants. The life of an empress is one of splendor. Yet beneath this beauty lies a different kind of struggle, one of power, politics, and constant surveillance. As a member of Catherine's court, you are always aware of the games being played, the delicate dance of loyalty and betrayal, the ever-watchful eyes of courtiers who seek favor, the constant pressure to maintain an image of perfection. You find yourself in one of the many salons where Catherine herself often presided. The room is filled with brilliant minds, philosophers, artists, foreign diplomats, all gathered to share their thoughts, ideas, and projects. Catherine encouraged this intellectual exchange, believing that Russia's future lay in enlightenment and the spread of Western knowledge. You can hear the soft voices of Voltaire and Diderot being discussed, as if their words are sacred texts. But despite the intellectual vibrancy, you are aware of the tensions that lie beneath. Court life is a performancer, continual balancing act of appearances. Even as you listen to discussions on art and philosophy, you cannot ignore the harsh reality that every action, every word, can have repercussions. The elites of Catherine's court were constantly vying for favor, often at the expense of others. The intricate dance of court politics meant that no one was truly safe. The temptation of betrayal was always in the air, and power shifts could happen in the blink of an eye. Catherine herself was a master of this world. She understood the complexities of her court and played the role of sovereign with grace and poise. Her relationships with the nobles were carefully curated. She didn't just surround herself with those who adored her, but with those whose ambitions matched her own. Each courtier, each noble had their own agenda, and Catherine, ever perceptive, could see through it all. Her ability to maneuver through these complex dynamics was one of the keys to her success as empress. Life at court, while opulent, was far from carefree. The pressure to maintain an air of authority was constant. Catherine, though beloved by many, had to defend her position at every turn. Her relationship with her son, Paul, was a delicate one, full of tension and disagreement. While she embraced the role of empress with elegance, she was constantly reminded of the fragile nature of power. The elite were not only concerned with politics and power, though. They lived lives of extraordinary luxury. The palaces were filled with magnificent art, gilded furniture, and countless treasures. The best artists, musicians, and architects of the time flocked to Russia, eager to gain the favor of the empress. St. Petersburg itself, a city built on marshland, was a testament to Catherine's grandeur, an architectural marvel that seemed to rise up from the very earth. In the evenings, the court would gather for extravagant balls. The music would play softly, and dancers would glide across the polished floors in their elaborate gowns and uniforms. The sound of the orchestra filled the air, a delicate backdrop to the sparkling chandeliers overhead. Every detail was designed to impress. The court's attire was just as meticulously crafted. Velvet, silk, and lace adorned the nobility, while powdered wigs and diamond-studded tiaras completed the ensemble. These gatherings were not only about socializing, they were about signaling power. The more extravagant the display, the more respect you commanded. Yet despite the luxury, there was always the underlying tension. The court was rife with competition. Everyone sought favor, whether it was from the empress herself or from the influential families that surrounded her. It was a world of alliances, secret deals, and shifting loyalties. While the balls were a celebration, they were also an arena for competition and intrigue. You could almost feel the undercurrent of ambition beneath the soft laughter and light conversation. Outside of the court, Russia's elite enjoyed their own privileges. They had vast estates, often thousands of miles away from the city. Here, in the countryside, life was more relaxed, but no less opulent. The nobles hosted lavish hunting parties where horses and dogs were carefully bred for the chase. Their estates were like miniature kingdoms, complete with their own servants, artisans, and landowners. This was the life of luxury and excess, But even in the serenity of their country estates, the elite were not free from the demands of the empire. Despite the opulence, Catherine's Russia was not a society without its challenges. While the nobility lived in splendor, their position was always precarious. The rise of new politifactions, the whispers of rebellion, and the unrest in the provinces constantly threatened the stability of the empire. The elite were often caught between loyalty to the crown and their own ambitions. Their lives were full of contradictions, luxury alongside the ever-present possibility of revolt or scandal.